advised.
You don't know, are they gonna go kill the rest of my family?
Did you do it?
No, darling, I didn't do it.
Are they gonna try and find me? You know, I'm listed in the local papers as to where I'm gonna be at what time because I'm playing.
He looked crazed. He was acting crazed. This shouldn't have happened.
David Michael Navarro was born on June 7, 1967, in Santa Monica, California. His household was defined by contrast. His father, James, came from a hard-working Mexican-American family with strong values and discipline. His mother, Connie, lived in a completely different lane. Blonde, charismatic, and glamorous. A beautiful model who had also dabbled in TV.
And your mom was this beautiful woman. She was on The Price is Right.
Yeah.
I mean, she was doing well.
You know, it's my mom, so of course I feel, special towards her, but I've always likened to her to having a Sharon Tate quality.
I was just gonna say that.
Just
Yes.
beauty, no matter what angle, what she's doing, what she's saying, like if she's in the middle of a sentence and they snap a picture and she's talking, it's
She
still
just looked
gorgeous.
great.
You know that thing?
Like
So-
her making a...
So, Dave grew up with two contrasting lifestyles.
I was kind of a happy kid, to a degree.
And when he was just 7 years old, that balance broke. His parents divorced, and he went to live with his mother in Bel Air.
Well, my parents were divorced and I was living with my mother.
His father became something more structured. You know, scheduled visits on set days and limited time. Anyway, growing up, Dave's early introduction to music came through piano lessons, which says a lot about the kind of direction his life was initially given. Piano is structured, disciplined, almost cautious, but that direction didn't hold for long. First, he discovered Jimi Hendrix. Then his father bought him a guitar, and that opened a different kind of door.
When I was 10 years old, I was at a skate park and I heard Voodoo Child playing on the loudspeaker. And I looked up and I looked up at the speaker and I went inside and I asked the guy behind the counter, I'm like, what is this? What are we playing? He's like, this is Jimi Hendrix.
Hendrix in particular is the kind of artist that doesn't simply inspire you, he consumes you. And for Dave, that meant thinking bigger than guitar lessons. He wanted to become a fucking rock star.
But it wasn't until I heard Jimi Hendrix where I was like, this is what I want to do. That's what I want to do with my life.
But while that identity was starting to take shape, something else was developing in parallel. At Notre Dame High School in California, Dave was introduced to drugs. His focus began to slip, his grades followed, and whatever structure had been holding things together started to loosen. Eventually, the situation became so unsustainable that the school expelled him. For most teenagers, that would have been a turning point, the point where their life starts to go wrong. But in Dave's case, that was nothing compared to what would happen next. Dave's mother, Connie, had been in a relationship with a bodybuilder named John Riccardi. Eventually, the relationship had ended, but Riccardi couldn't let it go and began stalking her. What made the situation even more disturbing was that Riccardi wasn't just an unstable ex. He was living a double life as a burglar. And over the course of several months, he used those skills to break into Connie's apartment over and over again, showing her very clearly that he could get to her whenever he wanted and nobody would stop him.
If he couldn't have her, no one else could.
I mean, that's what you would think. I mean, there is no logical explanation for something like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think in that irrational thinking, that's what was
The
going
guy's locked up.
Then he followed her, watched her, scared her. On one occasion, he showed up at a restaurant where Connie was eating, locked eyes with her, and pretended to shoot her with his hand.
It's really hard because there's a lot of shame attached to it.
Right.
You know, a lot of people don't want to admit that they've allowed themselves to be in a volatile situation like this.
in 1983 when this happened, there weren't a lot of outreach programs for domestic violence, and there weren't places for my mom to go and seek help. That wasn't as on the forefront of our tongues as it is now.
Riccardi didn't limit his control to Connie. Dave was also a victim. One morning, he was homesick when he heard someone break into the apartment. There wasn't time to process it. Riccardi was already inside. He walked in with a gun, pointed it at Dave, then restrained him and locked him in the bathroom.
At first, he tried to handcuff me facing the toilet with my hands around the toilet, face down into the bowl. And I was like, and I'm crying. I'm like, you can't, I can't move. You can't do this.
At one time, I remember through the investigation, he mentioned to the police that he was even handcuffed to a toilet seat by Riccardi. I hear screaming, "Where's my son? Where's my son?" I believed he was going to kill her and me that day.
Things escalated on the night of March 3rd, 1983. That night, Dave was meant to stay with his mother. But at the last moment, those plans changed, and he stayed with his father instead.
I used to spend Wednesday evenings with my dad.
Right.
And for some reason, he couldn't see me one Wednesday, and he saw me on a Thursday instead.
Right.
And that's when this happened.
That night, Riccardi broke into Connie's apartment and killed her.
He had no acts of violence on his criminal record. But what he did that night was he broke into her apartment out in West LA, and he waited for her to come home. And at that time, she was with her girlfriend, Susan Jury. And her and Susan came into the house, and they confronted him, and he pulled out a firearm and shot both of them.
It was actually my mother and my aunt who happened to be there.
And they were murdered by this one guy.
Yeah.
David believed, and I got a chance to meet him, he really believed that he would have been killed that night if he was staying with his mother.
Dave was only 15 years old, and all of the sudden, he was faced with an horrific trauma he wasn't given the tools to deal with. His father, dealing with his own grief, was unable to provide the stability or emotional support his son needed.
No, my dad was there. He just, he loved this woman. And so, we were both kind of like...
Devastated.
Yeah, we were both devastated.
That emotional absence left him searching for something to hold on to. He found it in two places, music and heroin.
Where I went as a child, turning to music, turning to really seriously bad drug addiction.
Yeah.
At that age, I really didn't know what to do. I got very heavily involved in music, thank God, because that's ultimately what I went on to do. But I also, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, got deeply into drugs.
The guitar became a form of expression, a way to externalize what he couldn't articulate.
I don't even know how, as a child, that you were able to concentrate on guitar and play the guitar.
You don't know where to go with that kind of stuff,
No.
and you don't know who to talk to. You kind of don't even have the dialogue to talk to anybody about that kind of thing. I mean, it's just so overwhelming.
Right.
And so I just kind of turned to music.
While drugs numb the pain.
I definitely used drugs as an escape from the death issue, but I also used the death issue to do drugs.
Even as he tried to move forward, there was no real sense of closure. Riccardi had vanished after the murders. He got away with it, and for years remained free. No matter how much Dave played or tried to numb himself, the man who had killed his mother was still out there. That knowledge carried a constant weight, a sense of danger that never fully disappeared.
So yeah, it definitely changed my life, and it brought on a lot of fear. It was that age I realized that anything can and could happen, and I spent a lot of years being very nervous about what potentially could go wrong with the world and with life, rather than looking into what's good about it.
In a moment, I will go deeper into the whole Riccardi situation. But first, it's important to address one thing. As his life got worse, Navarro's playing got better. His pain fed the music, and the music gave his pain a sound.
Sound has consequences.
Sure.
You know, I put on Dark Side of the Moon, and I'm like, you know, I enter a portal into some other dimension of beauty and freedom and colors and feelings and emotions and depth.
Eventually, he met drummer Stephen Perkins, who invited him to join a band alongside singer Perry Farrell and bassist Eric Avery.
The band got together in the late 80s and like kind of really didn't have a reason to be together because Perry was goth, Eric was punk, and Steven and I were in a speed metal band. Right? But I think that what happened is we all looked at each other's musicianship and were fascinated by it, you know? They couldn't do the stuff that we could do, and we couldn't do the stuff that they could do. And they didn't listen to anything we listened to, and vice versa.
That band would soon be known as Jane's Addiction. He was 19 years old, and what he brought to Jane's Addiction was pretty unique. His guitar could shift without warning, from something inviting and kind of seductive to something darker and violent. It wasn't controlled as much as it was honest.
It's not all about shredding and proficiency and music and musicianship and, you know, music theory. It's about creating a feeling.
It's worth pausing here to understand what Jane's Addiction actually was. In the mid to late 1980s, Los Angeles rock was dominated by bands like Mötley Crüe, Poison, and Rat. You know, tons of hairspray, ultra-polished sound, and songs built to make money and not ask too many questions. Jane's Addiction didn't belong in that world.
I took the live presentation, the theatrical side of music, looked at groups like the Velvet Underground and Iggy Pop and David Bowie. So to me, music and theater go hand in hand.
Farrell led the band with a strange theatrical vision. Avery brought a melodic, driving bass style that carried as much weight as the guitar. Perkins played with feverish, maniac energy. And then there was Navarro, bringing something entirely different, emotional, beautiful, and aggressive at once. They didn't fit the scene, which is exactly why they stood out.
The music industry in those days just kept on going to try to make rock bigger and bigger. Stadium rock, there was a lot of money in it. So everybody was thinking money, money, money. And then we came along and I was thinking fun, fun, fun. You know, I was thinking art, art, art. And with that in mind, I didn't have anything to lose because I wasn't afraid of not making money. I didn't think I was gonna make any money, to be honest with you.
When Jane's Addiction first got started, we didn't imagine in our wildest dreams that we would amount to anything. So as a result of that, we stayed true to what we wanted to do. We played the music we wanted to make because we were the ones that ultimately had to be happy. We didn't have goals like gold records or girls or cars or money, like a lot of the stuff that today's media dangles in front of artists as, you know, what the pot of gold is at the end of the road. That's not what it's about, because you can watch a million artists time and time again reach that pot of gold and ultimately be miserable. And that's happened over and over again, and some of our greatest talents have died due to suicide and drug addiction because that isn't the answer. So the truthful answer is to stay motivated, stay positive, stay in love with your craft, and you can't go wrong.
In 1987, Jane's Addiction recorded their first album live at the Roxy in LA. It cost $4,000, and it sounded exactly like that in the best way possible. Messy, loud, and completely alive. They dropped it independently and was carried by word of mouth, eventually leading to them signing with Warner and releasing Nothing's Shocking in 1988. And they didn't clean anything up. The album's cover got banned because it included nudity. and MTV refused to play the video for Mountain Song for the same reason. Anyway, critics loved the album. Nothing Shocking received a Grammy nomination, and Rolling Stone later included it on its 500 greatest albums of all time. One track in particular stood out, Jane Says. Musically, it was fairly uplifting and funky, but the lyrics were about a woman trapped in a cycle of addiction she couldn't break. And then there was Ted, Just Admit It, a long, unsettling track built around obsession, media, and the figure of serial killer Ted Bundy. It's easily the darkest moment on the album. Both tracks hit harder when you consider that playing the guitar was a young man who was using heroin as a way to cope with the murder of his mother.
It was a really uncertain time. Of course, the killer was on the run, I was on tour, and when you're talking about someone who's as insane as the guy who's going to kill 2 women, right? You don't know, are they going to go kill the rest of my family? Are they going to try and find me? I'm listed in the local papers as to where I'm going to be at what time because I'm playing. So that was a little terrifying.
And while John Riccardi was still out there, Navarro was playing like an angel and shooting heroin, grieving a murder that still had no resolution. Which takes us to his first heroin overdose.
My first OD was in England in like 1989 in a squatter flat where it's just street kids living. We had no power, it's just, we squatted in this.
I need to make sure this is going.
Well, it's not a great story.
Okay.
Okay, so we found this abandoned building, and me and these street kids, we were all junkies. I was on tour with Jane's Addiction, and I had a day off, and I hooked up with these dudes. We went to this flat. I shot up, and I went out. I'll never forget this. I'm like laying down like this, and I open my eyes, and I go, "What's going on?" He's like, and he's looking down at me. He's like, "Dude, you were fucking dead.
Like no pulse.
No pulse.
Do you remember
no breathing."
when you?
So
were
and I got him looking at him. I go, "Wow." I go,
"Why'd you bring me back?
Is there any more dope left?" First question.
What is wrong with you guys?
In mid-1989, the band began to record their follow-up, Ritual de lo Habitual. The sessions were a mess. Drugs were everywhere. Navarro later said he barely remembers making the album, which tells you everything you need to know. But somehow, the album doesn't just work. It's actually great. Released in 1990, it sold 500,000 copies in a month. But what really makes it stand out is how it's split. The first half is loose, chaotic, and fun. Been Caught Stealing turns petty crime into something weirdly joyful. Stop and Ain't No Right hit hard, driven by Navarro's gritty, repetitive riffs. But then the mood flips. The second half slows everything down and gets personal. Then She Did is about Perry Farrell's mother, who took her own life when he was 4. Do I really have to spell out the connection between him and Navarro? These are 2 kids who are hurting and using music to express a pain that doesn't go away.
The only way to not live in my car was to live in a trailer park with a couple of other junkies, which no furniture in a trailer for 6 months, and just basically looking out the window the entire time, making sure that the cops aren't coming. That's what I did for about a good 6 months of my life.
That's what happens.
I stared out a window.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was when we made Ritual de lo Habitual. So I would go to the studio from the trailer park, record my guitar parts, come home, shoot coke, and stare out the window, certain that all the federal government and the CIA and the FBI and law enforcement,
they're in the trees.
They all want to come after me because I have 2 grams of.
That's exactly what
you believe it.
Right? Yeah.
The delusion is
paranoia.
So insane. Yeah.
The album became one of the first alternative records to go platinum, opening the door for bands like Nirvana, Pearl Jam, and Soundgarden to follow. Rolling Stone would later include also this one in its list of the 500 greatest albums of all time. To promote the album, Farrell created Lollapalooza, a traveling festival that brought together artists who didn't fit the mainstream mold. and Jane's Addiction shared the stage with Living Colour or 9 Inch Nails, just to name a few.
We were all just sitting around, like throwing out the names of our favorite bands, and people that we admired, and people we wanted to play with, and people that we thought would be a weird fit. And we were focusing on making the lineup eclectic.
A wild new alternative rock tour kicked off in Phoenix, Arizona on Thursday night. It's a multi-act package called the Lollapalooza Tour, and it features Jane's Addiction, along with such opening acts as Living Colour, Ice-T, Susie and the Banshees, and the Butthole Surfers. Our man Dave Kendall was on hand for the Phoenix opener, and here's a quick preview.
It was the moment alternative music became its own world.
Who did you come out to see today?
9 Inch Nails and Jane's Addiction.
What do you like so much about them?
What I like about them? Their beat, the way they sound.
But while the movement was expanding, the band itself was beginning to fracture. Behind the scenes, things were tense, cold, and often hostile. Perry was becoming more controlling over the band's creative direction and finances. He wanted a bigger share of royalties and more authority over decisions. From his perspective, he was the frontman, the voice, the one shaping the identity. From the other's perspective, it started to feel like the band was no longer a band of brothers, but a supporting band for Perry's solo project. At the same time, Navarro and Avery were both deep into heroin addiction, and you can imagine how something like that might affect emotional stability, trust, and communication. The breaking point came during Lollapalooza. There were arguments, resentment, and a sense that nobody really trusted each other anymore. By the end of the tour, the band was done. They single-handedly paved the way for a plethora of alternative rock bands and launched a festival that changed the culture around them. And their albums? Come on. They were enough to leave a mark and secure their legacy. But despite all the art he created and the drugs he used, Dave was still hurting. And Riccardi was still free. For 8 years, the man who killed Connie Navarro remained free. He moved across the country, committing burglaries, collecting cash and jewelry, and living as though the murder had no consequences.
This is America's Most Wanted. I'm John Walsh. Tonight, we'll ask for your help with one of the Justice Department's top priority cases, and we'll re-examine a case with $1 million.
Then, in 1991, the same year Jane's Addiction was falling apart, something changed. The case was featured on America's Most Wanted.
The only social media resource we really had back in the 80s, late 80s, 90s was America's Most Wanted.
When you have a passionate, dedicated guy like Ralph DeFonso who says, I've hit the wall, this guy's dangerous, he could kill again, where do people come? They come to America's Most Wanted. We are the court of last resort.
The show focused on real fugitives, reconstructing their crimes and broadcasting their identities to a national audience. Over time, the show actually became some sort of extension of law enforcement efforts.
America's Most Wanted came to us. They wanted to do our story, cover it, and I was like, man, they're trying to sensationalize this really horrible tragedy. You know, how little did I know that years later I would. But, TV being what it was back then, and I guess what it is, they're like, okay, we don't have the family's consent, but we're going to do this anyway. And we were a little offended by it, and wouldn't you know it, that program was a vital role in catching this killer.
After the show aired, a viewer recognized Riccardi and alerted the authorities.
Now, Connie Navarro's killer, John Riccardi, was on the run for 8 years before he was finally caught by authorities. Take a look.
When agents finally tracked Riccardi down, he was living in a stylish condominium in Houston, surrounded by cash and stolen jewelry. It didn't look like he had been hiding in fear. It actually seemed like he had been living well and sleeping peacefully.
Because there's so many things in there. I mean, like, next to his bed, there would be 20 pairs of glasses. I mean, crazy things. We just found so much there. I think the agents in Houston recovered over $2 million worth of stuff.
At the time, Navarro was 24 years old. His band had just broke up, and he was deep in heroin addiction. His mother's killer had spent nearly a decade free, but now, finally, there was the promise of justice.
Did you do it?
No, darling, I didn't do it.
Dave and his father both attended the trial that followed. And at one point, Dave was forced to take the stand and face, in a formal courtroom setting, the man he had last seen pointing a gun at him in his mother's bathroom when he was a kid.
Was he remorseful?
No.
He wasn't?
Just a
No.
just a
No.
piece of shit.
No. Not
What?
even remotely.
What?
No.
In 1994, Riccardi was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. However, that sentence was later changed to life without the possibility of parole. Not the outcome the jury had originally delivered, but still, Connie Navarro's killer would never walk free again. For Dave, it wasn't closure. Nothing so neat and conclusive as that. It was more like the removal of an open wound's sharpest edge. But the scar remained, and it always would.
Did you forgive your mom's?
Fuck no.
All right, good.
Forgive him?
No, good.
Yeah.
No, because there's a lot of people that talk about, it's healthy to actually forgive the person.
It may be healthy, but I gotta forgive I gotta start with the building that put this elevator system in place. You know what I mean? There's a lot. There's a few more.
It's a long
There's
list.
a few more immediate areas that I could put forgiveness towards.
In the immediate aftermath, Navarro did what creatives do when they have too many emotions to process: create art. Following the initial breakup of Jane's Addiction, Avery and Navarro recruited drummer Michael Murphy and formed Deconstruction as a one-time project. The band's very name felt like a statement of intent. To deconstruct is to take apart and examine the component pieces of something in order to understand what it actually was. That was exactly what Avery and Navarro were doing. Taking apart the thing they had built together, examining the wreckage, and trying to figure out what came next. The self-titled album was released in 1994, but it barely registered on the mainstream radar. No significant radio play, minimal MTV coverage, and almost no press. But among those who found it, it developed a devoted cult following. And many fans consider this album to be the best thing any member of Jane's Addiction did after Jane's. It also didn't help that the band never toured to support the album, mostly because Avery was uninterested in doing so after the stress of his years with Jane's Addiction. So the album arrived and departed almost silently, but it deserved far better. Meanwhile, the Red Hot Chili Peppers were one of the biggest rock bands on the planet. Their 1991 album, Blood, Sugar, Sex, Magic, had sold over 7 million copies in the United States alone. Then their guitarist, John Frusciante, overwhelmed by fame and spiraling into his own addiction, walked off stage mid-tour in Japan in 1992 and quit the band. For a short period, the Peppers tried a series of fill-ins, but none of them worked. They needed someone truly extraordinary.
John left, which was an absolute shattering, breakup of all breakups. And then we went through, we gave it our best to try to, find somebody that we could make music with. It was never going to be like it was with John. So we weren't aiming for that. But we once tried to play with this guy, Xander Schloss, who was a genius, but didn't find the right chemistry. Then we had Arik Marshall shortly after John left, and we did a Lollapalooza tour, the second ever Lollapalooza tour, and that was beautiful, but chemistry still wasn't what we were looking for, and so we decided to go for somebody kind of from our circle.
So eventually, they tried Dave Navarro, and for a moment, it worked.
Dave showed up, and he was in a pretty good way at that point in time. So it was interesting to find a way to make music with another person, kind of like getting a divorce and getting a new girlfriend and like, how's this going to work? And we did write some special songs with Dave.
There was something dark about this pairing that was never addressed openly. The Red Hot Chili Peppers were a band that had already lost their original guitarist, Hillel Slovak, to a heroin overdose in 1988. And into this environment walked a man who had been using heroin daily since he was a teenager. It was not so much a band as a gathering of people trying to outrun the same darkness, making extraordinary music in the process. Navarro's first large-scale performance with the band was at Woodstock '94. Visually, he blended perfectly with the rest of the band, commanding the stage with Kiedis and Flea, shirtless, lean, and tattooed, in front of thousands of people. Whatever doubts existed about whether a Jane's Addiction guitar hero could find his place in the Peppers universe were largely quieted after that show. In June, they started working on One Hot Minute, and the sessions were, by all accounts, difficult and marked by the same substances that would later ruin this collaboration.
When we were doing One Hot Minute, I don't think it's any secret that Anthony experimented with drugs in the past.
Mm-hmm.
He put out a whole book about it.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm not outing him. But during the writing and recording of One Hot Minute, he would go missing for weeks. And he would just go check into a hotel. We wouldn't know where he is.
Which you can relate to, of course.
Which I can completely relate to. And I've done that many times myself. So many times we didn't know if we had a singer. We didn't know if he was alive. We didn't know what we were doing. We were held up for months, very inconvenienced, blah, 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 blah. That's what happens when you're in this business and you work with people on drugs. I've been through it before. I hate to say it, but it's kind of like rock star tax. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you got to wait for the guy to get his shit together to do your thing.
One Hot Minute was characterized by prominent use of heavy metal guitar riffs and hints of psychedelic rock. Thing is, Navarro, unlike Flea and Kiedis, was not really too fond of funk music. Warped, in particular, was a dark song about addiction. Arguably, the album's most visceral track. The sound of a band collectively staring into the abyss. Given that it was made by men who were living those themes in real time, that darkness is not a stylistic choice as much as it is a document. Aeroplane, on the other end, is the album's most accessible and radio-friendly track, and it became an unlikely charmer with its deceptive lightness, masking the same themes of dependency and loss that ran through the entire record. The album was polarizing. Peppers fans who had fallen in love with the funk grooves of Blood Sugar Sex Magic felt disoriented, even betrayed. Kiedis and the rest of the band would eventually look at the album as a reminder of a time they'd rather leave in the past. Which is unfortunate because the album is great.
And what we discovered is it doesn't matter how great of a musician you get, if the chemistry isn't, sent from God, you might not have the magic.
Yeah.
One Hot Minute is not a Chili Peppers album in the way that Californication or Blood Sugar Sex Magic are Chili Peppers albums. It is something stranger and more uncomfortable. A record about addiction made by addicts. About loss, made by men in the process of losing themselves. With a guitarist who had been carrying unspeakable grief since he was 15 years old. It is one of the most honest albums any of them ever made. But Navarro never fully belonged there.
We didn't really connect as deeply. We made a record and we worked, but we kept the band going.
And that's when the past came back. Perry Farrell proposed to bring back Jane's Addiction for a short run of shows. Navarro agreed to it, perhaps hoping to find a sense of belonging that he didn't find in the Peppers. So in 1997, the band reunited. But once they did, things didn't take long to spiral out of control.
The second I got into the rehearsal room for a Jane's Addiction tour, it was like, this would be so much better on heroin. Like immediately. Like I walked in the door, I was like, oh my God, we've got to have heroin instead. Instead of mineral water, this is bullshit.
It was, in a terrible way, almost inevitable. Put Navarro and Farrell in a room together, two men who had always used together, and the outcome was never really in doubt.
Me and Perry kind of stepped aside and was like, do you have the guy? And I got the guy. Okay, well, let's get the guy. So
Was Perry also sober at this moment or off of heroin? Do you know?
At the time, he was not sober. I don't,
Okay.
This was, fucking
96, 97.
Yeah, it's like 97. So, so he and I get high, and then Perkins just sees it like, oh no, here we go again.
Navarro describes the tour that followed as one of the most over-the-top, drug-fueled things he has ever done.
And that was one of the most epic Jane's Addiction tours, and one of the most exciting, one of the most decadent, certainly one of the most drug-fueled on my part. I've never been that open and out and blatant and obvious about it, and dangerous and disgusting as well about it.
At the beginning of 1998, the Red Hot Chili Peppers started prepping for a new tour, but Navarro was totally dependent on drugs by then, so they confronted him and things escalated quickly.
We come back from the Jane's tour, and I keep getting high the same. I go live in the Argyle Hotel for a couple of months, and got really bad. Then I finally showed up for a Chili Peppers rehearsal, and we had a tour booked, and I honestly couldn't play a fucking note. And Anthony talks about it in his book, where I fell. I mean, I literally tripped into stacks of speakers and storage gear and whatever. Like I fell into a bunch of boxes, basically. And it was like pretty clear that I wasn't going to be able to get it together. And so they decided to go a different direction.
Riccardi was finally in jail, but in a way, so was Navarro at this point. Trapped in a dangerous cycle of masking his pain with drugs while self-sabotaging his own success. The late 1990s found Dave Navarro at the edge. He was no longer in either of the two biggest bands of his career. He was deep in heroin and cocaine addiction, and the psychological weight of everything, his mother's murder, the years of unprocessed grief, the trial, the fame, the chaos, was crushing him.
I've suffered with depression my whole life, okay? I lost my mother to murder at 15. So I have a deeply rooted history in trauma and PTSD. I was lucky enough to join a band at 17, Jane's Addiction, and there were all these finish lines in my head, like, once we get a record deal, I'm gonna be okay. Once we get a gold record, we're gonna be okay. Once I make a certain amount of money, we're gonna be okay. Once we get a certain level of visibility, or I get a certain girl, or once I make it here, I'm gonna be okay. And I'm here to tell you that there is no external thing that is going to fix the deep-rooted problem of trauma. So
his memoir, co-written with journalist Neil Strauss and published in 2004 under the title Don't Try This at Home, documents this harrowing period with startling honesty. In it, Dave points out that life as a heroin and cocaine addict isn't necessarily about the drugs, but the emotional baggage each person is carrying around.
Shame, okay? So there's a lot of shame that comes with addiction, with depression, with mental illness that a lot of people, and I've suffered with not only addiction, but mental health issues myself. And one of the things that prevents people from asking for help is the shame. They feel humiliated, they feel different, they feel like an outsider. And we have, the facts are that shame hasn't saved anybody. Shame is what keeps people dying. So being able to find the vulnerability within oneself to actually reach out for help is in fact a superpower that will magically change your life.
But Navarro's recovery was not defined by a single turning point. Instead, it developed gradually through sustained repeated decisions that slowly turned his life.
I'm not one of these guys who says recovered. I do say recovering because it is an everyday process. You know, I wake up and I've got a meditation that I do, and I gotta stay in check.
In 2001, he released his solo album, Trust No One.
From his brand new album, Trust No One, please welcome Dave Navarro.
The record featured a darker, more industrial sound compared to his work with Jane's Addiction and the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Reviews were mixed, and public attention, in any case, was more interested in his personal life at that point. Particularly his relationship with actress Carmen Electra, whom he married in 2003.
Yeah.
You know, so she's shooting whatever she's shooting. I'm on tour. We see each other. Like we had to book our wedding around her shooting schedule and my touring schedule, and like fly in and get married really quick, and then had to fly back out. Like it was just, it's insane.
Tommy told me the same thing. He's like the same situation.
In 2004, the two documented their married life in an MTV show called Till Death Do Us Part, which gave the impression that the two were genuinely happy together.
It's a really big step for us to actually have a reality show and have them come and shoot us when I'm not in hair and makeup, with just nothing but a t-shirt and jeans and not really caring about how I look.
For a time, they were one of Hollywood's most watchable couples. But stable relationships in Hollywood are rare, and in 2007, they divorced.
Actually, what happened was we took a break, and in that break, you know, I had a break, and I went out and did what I did, and then I got blasted by Us Weekly and People and all that shit, and it became a big fucking, you know, so the press basically just took my relationship and squished it and traumatized it into a fucking heartbreaking story. But what else is new? That's what they do.
And so then she was like, well, I don't want to go back together now because of you know, all this stuff or whatever.
It wasn't so much that. I think it just after that, like, and then after the explosion of everything, it was just like, and we'd had some time apart. It was just like, let's just be fucking cool with each other.
Were you happy about that? Like, do you feel like that was like a content thing?
In the moment, no. In the moment, no. But I'm super happy it worked out that way.
Okay.
Because I got a rad friend out of it, and I've had a million amazing other experiences, and I've met other really incredible women that have inspired me.
The reality show with Carmen Electra made one thing clear. Navarro wasn't just a guitarist. He was a natural entertainer. But it was Ink Master that helped him showcase this part of his personality.
Canvases, one by one, please introduce the subject of your portrait.
Premiering in 2012 on Spike TV, the show placed tattoo artists in a structured competition where every episode tested a different skill. You know, line work, shading, composition, adaptability. Artists were given time limits and asked to execute permanent designs on real people, under pressure and with no room for error.
Okay, that's it. Time's up. Machine's down. No more tattooing.
Navarro stood at the center of it, not just as a host, but as the one setting the tone, introducing the challenges, managing the tension, and sitting alongside respected tattoo artists like Chris Nunez and Oliver Peck to evaluate the work in detail. And it worked, because he belonged there. By that point, Navarro had spent decades building his own body as a canvas.
Many times they're often sentimental in nature, and I have quite a few that have sentimental, deep, profound sentimental meaning to me.
A man whose body had become a canvas, who understood tattoos not only as decoration, but also as a diary.
One of my most sentimental is this right here. It says, I have one, but not by choice. And there's a rose here. Basically, I was on an airplane, and there's this woman sitting next to me, an old woman. And she looks at all my work, and she says, I have one, but not by choice. And I was like, okay. And she rolls up her sleeve and reveals her Holocaust numbers, where she was in Auschwitz as a little girl. Proceeds to tell me a story of her family being torn from her. It was a heart-wrenching story. And her name was Rose, and that story had such a profound effect on me that I went to
commemorate that moment because as much as I appreciated her sharing it with me, I was also able to have a sense of gratitude for where my life is.
Throughout this period, Jane's addiction continued to get back together, dissolve, and then reunite again. They got together once more in 2011 to release The Great Escape Artist.
We had gotten together, gotten out on the road, and began performing for people again, but we hadn't had new material for, I guess, 7 years or something like that. And the idea of performing, to continue to perform for people without new material was heartbreaking. So we knew that we had the goods still within us as the performances were doing so well. The energy was there, and so was the desire to record.
The album leaned into a more polished and atmospheric sound, incorporating electronic elements and moving further away from the rawness that defined their earlier work.
Lyrically, it's still very much Perry, but the music is, it's a bit of a departure, but then again, we're the same band, so we still have our foot in what we've always done.
In 2015, Navarro made a documentary called Morning Sun. The documentary was centered on the murder of his mother, with a level of detail Navarro had never before unpacked so openly.
Actually, it took several years to make this thing and put it together in the way that we thought was the safest and the most presentable, and certainly watching out for anything that would be triggering for me, because there's a lot of information in there that would be triggering if you weren't doing personal work on your own during the process. So I was in, I made sure to stay close to therapy and good friends like Todd, and it worked out good.
Wow.
Directed by his close friend, Todd Newman, the film avoids feeling like a traditional crime documentary. It's slower, more personal, built around conversations, reflection, and the willingness to sit with pain and trauma while resisting the urge to sugarcoat anything. The addiction, the disconnection, the way that trauma carried forward into every phase of his life.
When we go through traumatic experiences like this, in order to protect ourselves, we shut down emotionally and lock things away. So to avoid feeling bad, I would not think about my mom's death. But then along with that came not thinking about anything before that. I had 15 years that were great years with her. And I had locked all that away too, because if I open that door, then that's gonna lead me to this scary, terrible thing, and that's gonna hurt. So I should just shut it all out.
The most extraordinary moment of the film came when Navarro sat down face-to-face with Riccardi in prison.
I went into the prison with the hopes of confronting the killer and having some kind of cathartic experience. Like, I've walked through this last door of fear, and if I can do this, I can do anything. And I've come to learn that life is full of scary stuff, and he was chained to a chair. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The rest of the world is not chained to a chair. So once I finally got there, it was just kind of like a weird, awkward exchange. And I just left, and I was like, maybe this wasn't the best idea. I actually went through a process where I thought it fucked me up more, but it ended up, I think it ended up being the right move, in terms of, I'm the kind of guy that as soon as something makes me nervous or scared, I'm like, fuck, because I know I have to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, if I identify the feeling of fear, it's like, I gotta go now. You know what I mean? And so that was the same thing. So after having gone to San Quentin and walked through that fear, all that 15 years of memory and love and joy crept back into my soul, and I was kind of reintroduced to my own childhood in a weird way. I know that sounds really like, self-help-ish, but it's the truth. It's my experience.
In May 2024, Jane's addiction reunited once more to play a series of shows, but the reunion was not destined to last. On September 13th, their show in Boston took a wrong turn when Farrell appeared to lose himself in the performance, allegedly drifting off tempo and falling out of sync with the band.
I mean, I've watched this band play hundreds of times, and there's all kinds of stuff that, people that see the band a bunch, you too, like there's certain things that you see that no one will ever pick up on.
Right.
Cues between the members of like, we're going to do this part now, or like, where are we at? Or let's do this cool thing, or whatever the fuck. They all have these little things. But this one felt like Perry is getting angrier and more detached, and like it's almost like when someone becomes a werewolf, like things just kind of start
like a psychotic break.
Yeah. That's kind of yes. Eyes change, body language changes, and he's lost in the song. So I can't tell if he's frustrated because he's lost or frustrated over something else, but he's just kind of like grunting and yelling, and it's just weird. It's strange, and it's hard to watch because he looks and sounds out of control.
As the show went on, he grew more frustrated, seemingly convinced it was actually the rest of the band that had fallen out of tempo.
He starts kind of berating the band and like saying like, fuck these motherfuckers.
Things escalated when, out of the blue, he shoved and punched Navarro.
He goes over and he pushes Dave. I'm tuning a guitar. I see the push. Guitar comes right off. And I make a beeline right for both of those guys. And this is where it gets like real sad. I sort of grew up like sort of defending my mom a little bit, like physically defending my mom sometimes, defending my little sister against somebody, whatever.
Right.
Not my dad, but somebody.
Yeah.
I love Dave. It's making me sad, actually.
Yeah.
But it felt like seeing a little kid getting bullied on the schoolyard for something he didn't do.
Yeah.
And he's been through enough shit in his life and did work so hard to get back to this point.
Right.
And to see that happen, it just triggered something in me. It made me really upset.
Right.
And I'm not going to let this happen to this guy.
According to the lawsuit Navarro and his bandmates subsequently filed, Farrell threw another punch backstage.
I feel for him because something is going on mentally, but he looked crazed. He was acting crazed, and this shouldn't have happened.
Right.
And it's very unfortunate.
A settlement was reached, but Jane's addiction is over. And yet, in the shadow of everything, there was also this. Navarro recently married actress Vanessa Dubasso on March 29th, 2025. After everything, the murders and the grief, the heroin and the sobriety, the band breakups and the lawsuits, Navarro found a happy ending. He is a survivor of violence that arrived without warning and stole the person he loved most. Of addiction, so long and brutal and lonely. Of the particular grinding feeling of being broken, but famous at the same time. Of standing on stages in front of thousands of people while a man who murdered your mother walked free somewhere in America. His music will last forever. His documentary will help other survivors accept their own pain. He turned his body into a canvas, his life into an open book, his pain into something that other people in pain could hold on to. Connie was a special woman, but in a strange, painful, beautiful way, she never really left. She lives in every note her son has ever played. In his art, in his success, and in the courage it took to confront his darkest demons. And that, in the end, is what makes Navarro's story something more than a rock biography. This story is about how you don't get to choose what happens to you. But you can choose what to do with it.